just around the corner, and in honour of that, I wanted to see myself in some films. So I decided, since finding out that queer South Asian films do in fact exist, to watch some of them. It's been a long time coming, and having seen some of these clips here and there about these over the last month when I've been trying to find movies that I wanted to watch for this video, I've been really excited to see how queerness is represented in South Asian, mainly Indian films. And so I started with Maja. This film is about a closeted lesbian mother, which sounds a little bit more serious than it actually is. Her son is getting married, and in the midst of his family meeting his new girlfriend's parents, begins drama that reveals to his holier-than-thou parents-in-law that his mother is actually a lesbian who has repressed herself to fit into society better. The film itself has a lot of heart and is definitely at least an enjoyable watch with some decent acting and direction. I think this film at least points mainstream queer South Asian narratives in the right direction. It focuses on both the support and the suffocation that family places on you, especially within an Indian household, and branches out to positively show different modes of community support that there are for queer people who do feel suppressed within Indian society. So I think if Maja trends into positively portraying South Asian queerness, I think shubh, mangal, zyada, saavdhan runs away from that. The message it wants to get across is undeniably progressive and ultimately a good thing, but I can't in good faith call it a good film because of this. A lot of films on the list are comedies, but where they kind of succeed and this fails is that the drama that gives them the heart in other movies is missing here. It falls into being a comedy more than wanting to engage with deeper issues, which would be fine if the movie delivered on being funny at any point. The gags are boring, the actors overact most of the film, and the slapstick falls flat. But at least in an incredibly oppressive atmosphere it got made, and perhaps that's impressive enough. I'm not sure I'm saying this one right, but ladki dekha aisa laga. I have no idea if I'm saying that right. I think this movie is praised by a lot of people, but honestly I found it kind of endlessly boring. Like a lot of the films I watch, it too focuses on family, but I just think focusing on family and honour and virtues this much didn't really help this film. Whilst this film depicts a happy and healthy queer couple, the film narratively favours spending time with the main queer character's family and trying to show us why they justify their homophobia and how homophobia is accepted into society, than expanding on queerness in any interesting way. Whilst I think the film focuses on this to gear viewers into being more accepting, I don't think it's very engaging. The pacing is wrong as it focuses on unnecessary plot lines. I think this film is more striking than others on this list that also have this problem, because the main plot line within the film is actually quite boring, because we follow the parents instead of the daughter, who in opposition is actually having quite a fascinating story develop around her. I think of the bunch, this is definitely my favourite, and that's because this one kind of decides to have a more enjoyable and involved plot when it comes to actually talking about this topic of queerness. It's a comedy with actual heart and actual jokes that land. It follows a lesbian and gay man who decide to get married because they're being pressured by their families otherwise, because they're single and only getting older. I thought the film would mainly be about convincing their families that they were indeed together and not gay, but this film kind of like goes beyond that. Usually these films kind of stop at the wedding and the beginning of a new life, but here we see them being like outwardly and overtly queer when living together. The film subverts lots of stereotypes and even allows their queer characters to be happy at the end. This film has hijinks and actual joyous fun imbued in it, which isn't what I can say for a lot of the other light-hearted comedic films that I watched. However, I do always forget how Indian films just play police brutality for laughs. Like, we see our main character brutalise a bad character and we're just meant to cheer him on, which really shocks me, especially when you realise what you're watching is police violence and not just like a gag. But of any of the films I watched, if I were really to recommend one, I'd pick this one. It's engaging, it's genuinely quite good, and it gives a chance to see good South Asian queer representation in an actual narrative story that isn't solely about coming out in any way. Margarita with a Straw is about a girl with cerebral palsy who wants to pursue music. The film follows her journey as she embarks on an undergraduate degree in music in America and a new relationship with a girl while she's studying there. The film tackles some societal issues and is definitely groundbreaking for trying to touch on this topic in a careful but removed from being quote-unquote preachy way. The acting is remarkable, I would say, and the story has actual weight. Layla's queerness is sweet and heartfelt, and I liked seeing her come to terms with her identity alongside her new girlfriend throughout the film. But as someone who is South Asian, watching a white girl play the main lead who is meant to be a South Asian is never going to sit well with me. The rampant colorism in Indian films is disgusting, and I hope the main actress's career shrivels and burns, and I wish the same upon Miss Amy Jackson. There's also a lot of criticism about her being able-bodied playing someone with cerebral palsy, and whilst perhaps it's not really my place to comment, I do agree that this would have been a great role for somebody with the condition to highlight their issues instead of just having someone put it on the entire time. Now, as someone who is Tamil and from Sri Lanka, I don't really know what we're meant to call ourselves, but yeah, that's what I am. I was definitely most anticipating this one. Overall, I think it's actually quite good. Looking around on the internet, I found a lot of angry Tamil reviews who felt this film did a disservice to us, but honestly, since this might be the first and only positive film I've ever seen about the struggle, I kind of refuse to believe the things that they do. Firstly, the film is quite straightforward. We immediately understand what the film is about, and I think the aspects of the Civil War that are discussed are quite directly implemented into the story. The only drawback I agree with in the general criticism is that I think some of the more direct aspects, which are about the Civil War, i.e. one of the main characters, doesn't really interact with Arji, the main character, in a very coherent way, and therefore their presence feels a little random within the film. We kind of cut to and from each character within the film, which is otherwise primarily interested in Arji's queerness more than anything else. Queerness here is referenced in a very specific way that essentially says there's no really time to be gay, so let's not cause social unrest where there's already social conflict, which I do think rings heartbreakingly true throughout. I'd say the wider aspects of the Civil War are very well executed, especially in showing the day-to-day dealings with Tamil and Sinhalese people in the film. I also think queerness in this film is very tender in a very touching way, and I was genuinely rooting for the couple because they felt very passionate and real within the film. Additionally, the film is beautiful, both in its physical cinematography through the shots chosen and also through the fantastic grading. I don't know about you, but I like romanticizing my own country. The biggest issue with this film is one I agree about, and that is the fact they don't actually cast any actual Tamil people to be in this film, which makes the film feel weird. Like, they can't speak Tamil properly, and that's very easily spotted by people who can, i.e. me. And they all speak English too much. Perhaps that's just a quirk of having to live in Colombo and due to them being upper class in Sri Lanka. And, like, the director not being Tamil, okay, fine. But the glaring stiltedness in the Tamil in a film about Tamils is a little ridiculous even to me. But I feel like the story and the film itself brings a sense of awareness of the war in a positive light, and I have to respect at least that. Both the author of the book and the director of this film are quite subversive, and they definitely let that show in this film, even if it is a very simplistic, straightforward film. So I followed the creator of this short film on Instagram, so I've been interested to see what it's about, and I have to say I was kind of disappointed. I give more leeway to some of the other films since they're made by Indians in India for Indians. There's much less progress there about being confidently out and proud, and so the simple coming out narratives don't bother me as much because that's kind of where the social position is at. But knowing that this is a British South Asian story does make me come out of it feeling it to be a little lacking. The film has a slightly experimental feel to it due to the nature of its structure, but it feels a little messy and it does make me question whether it was purposeful. It kind of partly feels like it was, I just don't know if it was necessary. It overcomplicates a narrative that is incredibly simple. The film feels like a dream sequence music video, and the cinematography and set design during those scenes are not interesting enough to really warrant those long shots of indulgence in my opinion. And it is made this way to celebrate outward queerness, but I feel like it feels clunky because it doesn't resonate a sense of warmth or enthusiasm that should come with those shots. I do partly feel like the reason for this is because there was a lack of budget, however. The queer narrative that takes up the bulk of this film is quite boring, overplayed and a little basic for something in 2022. South Asian families and acceptance is an important part of the South Asian experience, and we do need to hash this out. But I feel like the story that is actually being told about South Asian queer ancestry could be handled in a much more exciting and, more importantly, much more fascinating way than lumping it in with what this story actually wants to be. The best part of the film is definitely being able to see the joy of being proudly out and queer and South Asian and British. The colour of being South Asian imbued with the colour of queerness was very important to me, and I like that in this film the most. Unlike Funny Boy, which tries to say something and is helped by its beautiful visuals, Cobalt Blue rests on its visual prowess to carry it through. 2016 Art Ho, Yellow Cankins, Come Fuck Flower Boy, Bedroom Pop, Tumblr would have loved the screen grabs and gifs of this movie, but it doesn't really have any heart and no story. The acting doesn't really deliver, and everything the movie does to make it cater to the call their own name audience only really serves to make this film more boring than it could be. It's set alongside student revolution in Kerala and following a character obsessed with literature and writing in the film. It could have been something much more heart-wrenching and involved. Instead, it delivers a watered-down summer love story with a lack of chemistry and passion to carry this film, when the obvious focus of the film should have been the protagonist's sister, who wants to be on the national team and is obviously also struggling with her identity in different ways. And knowing the film is both written and directed by the same person who wrote the book that this is based on gives an answer, really, for why this film feels so claustrophobic and dull. So all the films that I did end up watching were on streaming. I also really wanted to watch Fire by Deepa Mehta, especially after watching Funny Boy, and also The Journey, but they are basically impossible to find and watch. Plus, I wanted to watch some queer short films that were shown at a film festival, but again, I could not source them. I feel like those would have been better Western South Asian stories than the one I did watch, but alas, I couldn't find them. I thought some of these films would be a bit more heartfelt than they were, but honestly that's okay. At the very least, we've made some progress in creating them and allowing them to exist. I just hope that the next films that we make are also focused on acting and writing, but I mean, seeing the state of mainstream Bollywood, I don't know if that's really ever been a priority. I want to find some more independent queer cinema from India, but honestly I feel like it's going to be an absolute quest, since I couldn't even find something like Fire, which is already kind of a famous film. Perhaps some films that aren't Indian, queer films from other parts of South Asia, if they exist. I had to search just to find these, but I'm optimistic in finding some and watching some new releases. I will always be siding with creating new queer South Asian media, especially independent films, because I like to believe that we only have room to improve on what we have and not to just keep nitpicking incessantly without being constructive about it, which I think is generally the South Asian mode of progress really is. But yeah, thank you for watching, and if you did actually watch all of this, I would love to see and hear of any other queer South Asian movies, if there are any, that I could watch anywhere that kind of readily and not have to search for hours to try and find a link somewhere.